Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast as we are continuing to dive into the world of college football. We just broke down Florida State's loss from last night, meaning that we are officially now on to week 2 of college football. And I just wanted to sort of look ahead here as to what the biggest games to keep an eye on are. And the main headliner, in my opinion, is Texas at Michigan. And this is a game between two top 10 teams currently. And I think that ultimately, we got two different pictures from them over the weekend. It's week 1 against opponents that weren't ever really going to push them all that much. So it's hard to take all too much away from it. Now, what I will say is Michigan's offense did seem to really struggle for a lot of that game against Fresno State, where ultimately it sort of came down to their defense making the sort of dagger play of Will Johnson's pick 6 to sort of put away Fresno State for good. But ultimately, Fresno was in this game for a while. They were driving. I believe they were in the red zone by the time Will Johnson scored the pick 6, taking it all the way down the length of the field. I think it was an 86-yard touchdown. So, ultimately, I do think that it's not a big deal. You can't overreact to Michigan looking a little bit sloppy, but it is something to take into consideration, at least, that I don't know if they have all of the answers right now. And a lot of fans have speculated that Michigan was just sort of trying to hold off a little bit in terms of showing their offensive firepower because of the fact that this game coming up against Texas is a real measuring stick game, and this is what was going to be extremely important for the sake of their season as a whole. But at the same time, I just don't know if I have confidence in the quarterback play from Michigan to really believe that that's all it was a play calling difference, that they just wanted to give a different look. Davis Warren ends up winning the starting job, and I still don't think I'm all that sold on him at this point. Now, very small sample size would be unfair to, jump to any extreme conclusions on that front, but I don't think that he looked very impressive. It sounded like Alex Orji for a while was going to win that starting job, but that doesn't end up being the case. Maybe it's something that could be sort of worked with a little bit more as the season goes on. Michigan is not unfamiliar to the idea of utilizing multiple quarterbacks in order to, provide different looks for opposing teams. They did that sort of pre-JJ McCarthy. A lot is new right now with Michigan under the leadership of Sharon Moore. So we'll see how it works out. This would be, you talk about, proving yourself for Sharon Moore. This would be the game to do so. You get it at home, which is a big deal for them. I'm fairly certain. Let me double check that it's not a neutral site game. But I'm fairly certain that this game, yes, is in Ann Arbor. So they at least have that going for them, but ultimately, I do worry about sort of how this could play out, but a matchup between two top 10 teams, again, even if I am a little bit skeptical about Michigan for this upcoming season, that being said, they still have incredible talent on the defensive side of the ball, and I think that, they can match up. They should be able to match up on the line of scrimmage with just about any team. And Texas is the real deal, absolutely. They just demolished Colorado State to the point where that's why I haven't even really brought up that game, is because they were so good that there wasn't any real competitive takeaways to come out of it. But that being said, Michigan, they're going to have an opportunity to sort of show the world that last year it wasn't all Jim Harbaugh, and that, there are levels to this program that is one of the more well-renowned ones in the country, and they hope to not take a step backwards this upcoming year. So that's the main headliner of the weekend. I will say, definitely have eyes on Tennessee at NC State. We just talked about with Florida State's loss. The ACC has seen a number of their top competitors fall already, and even NC State, I mean, it was a bit of a slow start for them versus Western Carolina, but Grayson McCall did seem to get more comfortable as the game progressed, and they were able to close it out what felt pretty handedly by the end of that game. Maybe, again, you want to go with the idea that they didn't want to show all too much against Tennessee. Again, I think that it's a little bit of a bogus argument, generally speaking, for just about any team. But, if you have different thoughts on that, let me know in the comment section. But this is a huge opportunity for NC State. I admittedly, headed into the season, did not give them all that much of a shot in the ACC. I thought that there was a little bit of a dividing line between the likes of Miami, Clemson, and FSU, and then you had NC State. But, I mean, with Clemson and Florida State both losing, and Virginia Tech as well, which is one of those other teams that were sort of potentially hovering in the mix for the conference title. NC State has an excellent chance to sort of separate themselves and show that people like myself should have been taking them more seriously, and they get a chance against a Tennessee team that, absolutely rolled over Chattanooga last weekend, but is still a little bit of a younger team. You're talking about quarterback Nico Iamaleava, a freshman that doesn't have all that much experience up to this point, that you can, if you can bring the heat on him defensively a little bit. I mean, he was sitting comfortable all game long versus Chattanooga, and I talked about this yesterday. I was blown away with the arm talent that he was able to display. But obviously, it's not just about sitting back and throwing. It's about how do you handle the pressure that's coming in front of you. That's something that if they can move Iamaleava off of his spot a little bit, we could see some of those growing pains, and we could see NC State potentially take advantage. Again, it was a messy game last week. They, defensively as well, I don't think that they were perfectly coherent either. I am blanking on the name. I have it somewhere here in my notes. But their starting linebacker ended up getting ejected on the first drive of the game versus Western Carolina, I should say. Caden Fordham, he ends up getting ejected at the very start of the game. But you have some playmakers on defense. Cornerback Aiden White, as well as somebody that I'm definitely keeping an eye on, as, again, Nico Iamaleava is going to get tested at some point. Can NC State be sort of the wake-up call for him? Now is the time to sort of strike if you are an opposing defense before he really gets himself going into the world of college football. That, I think that NC State has a great chance this week to, sort of put the ACC back on track a little bit. But if not, I mean, it could be some tough sledding for the conference as a whole moving forward. I'm also keeping my eyes on Boise State at Oregon. As of this afternoon, when I just went to check, Oregon is a 19.5 point favorite, and I think it could be a little bit closer than that as well. Oregon not overreacting to how the game went last week against Idaho. I mean, they were tested unexpectedly by Idaho. That's something, Oregon fans definitely don't feel great about. Some concerns maybe with the offensive line, and the penalties were really the big thing, sort of also going hand in hand with that offensive line. It was maybe slightly concerning, but that being said, Oregon, I think that they have the right guy in charge of it all in Dylan Gabriel. Even if the offense wasn't, perfect last week, I still think that Dylan Gabriel is more than capable of leading Oregon to a big-time season this upcoming year. So I still like Oregon a lot. That being said, Boise State's kind of a sleeper team, a team that could end up making the playoffs based off of, I would say that they are, in contention for being the fifth highest ranked conference winner, playing in the Mountain West, that I think really should be run through them, that they have a great chance to make the playoffs. And I mean, I'm not saying for them to go into Oregon and end up taking this game. But this is also a situation where just show that you're competitive. Oregon is a huge measuring stick for just about any team. And ultimately, Boise State, they at least have their identity with Ashton Jeanty, who went berserk in the first game of the season for Boise State. 20 carries, 267 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Now, this was a game against Georgia Southern that can be a little bit of an underrated program. That being said, they put up points against Boise State. That does have me a little bit concerned as to whether or not Boise can sort of hold on to Dylan Gabriel and this Oregon offense, that they're going to need to score points. They're going to need to see positive steps from Maddox Madsen, their quarterback, in order to make that happen. But again, I'm looking at that 19.5 point spread. Maybe it's, maybe I'm getting suckered into it, but I think that Boise State can at least stay alive in this game. And then the last game I just sort of wanted to point to as well. Sneaky game, I would argue, between Arkansas and Oklahoma State, considering the fact that, we've talked so much about the idea of it's the Big Ten and the SEC, and it's sort of everyone else from there. Oklahoma State, we actually did just have the rankings drop while we were doing this show, so a little live reaction to this, but Oklahoma State moves up one spot. They end up at number 16. This is a matchup against an Arkansas team that was picked to be at the bottom of the SEC. And, last week we saw the bottom team in that SEC preseason poll, and Vanderbilt able to upset Virginia Tech to sort of start the season off right for the SEC. And again, I just feel like for the Big 12 and the ACC, it is all about them trying to find a way to just sort of hang in there as well. And this is a matchup that Oklahoma State should certainly win. That's the idea. They are favored in this game. I can double check to see if the line's moved. It is Oklahoma State by 7.5. So I think it's a pretty big game for the Big 12 as a whole as well. And just kind of, again, following Vanderbilt's win last week, kind of just curious to see sort of the SEC supremacy. What level is that? Was last week a fluke against Virginia Tech? Was it more of just an indictment on the overall standing of the ACC? A lot of questions that can be asked from a conference perspective from last week. So that is also a game that I'm keeping my eyes on. But a whole lot of action. Let me know what your thoughts are, what your highlight games are. We'll probably come to you with a little bit more of an extensive poll ranking reaction, because we don't have the time for it maybe necessarily today, but I'm definitely interested to dive into those. Anthony Manzano comments, do you think what needs to happen with Florida is what happened with Miami? On Kirk Herbstreit called out the incompetence of the athletic department and the hiring process for coaches at Miami. So I'm assuming you are talking, previous iterations of Miami, considering the fact that, now they seem to be in a position where they can be the top competitor in the ACC. As of Florida, obviously, Billy Napier at this point sort of has a, red dot aimed right at him, considering the fact that he gets blown out at home against the in-state rival of Miami. And then he proceeds to talk about how, kind of attacking the fans a little bit. This is a very ESPN type segment, but there was a quote that was aggregated that the team shouldn't focus on, quote, what some guy in his basement staying in rural Central Florida on social media has to say, or something along those lines. That I think that Napier, there is, I don't know. I'm not going to say that he's incompetent yet in terms of his coaching ability. It's not good right now as things stand. And in that game as well, Graham Mertz did get hurt for whatever it's worth as well. Florida wasn't winning that game anyways, but that's a pretty big obstacle to overcome as well. So I have not seen any updates on Mertz as of this point. I'm assuming the fact that I haven't heard anything means that he's probably all right. But, be sure, feel free to fact check me in the comment section if I'm off on that one. But, I mean, I don't know if Miami, to your question, Anthony, I don't know if I'm ready to put Miami as sort of the gold standard of how to fix it. Seems like it's headed in the right direction and they're on an upwards trend. I've been on Miami since the beginning of the season, that I think they have an excellent opportunity to not just win the conference, especially now so after some of these games, but actually be a more serious national championship contender than people really gave them credit for headed into the season, where they were ranked number 19. Again, we're going to have to move on here, but I do want to actually briefly check here where Miami is ranked. So they're up 7 spots to number 12. So, I don't think that what's happening to Florida right now, I mean, they're going to have to iron out the answers, but to be honest, I mean, I think that there's probably, it starts with the coaching, but it's been a mess in Florida for years, especially when you talk about just the overall ability to not get in their own way. That, I don't know. I am definitely concerned long-term about Florida, and we'll see how it works because they have a buzzsaw of a schedule coming in ahead for the remainder of the season. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section. We're now going to be switching gears to the NFL. And to start off, now that this is officially opening week, I'm going to list my top 5 favorite games and storylines for the upcoming week. So we will be diving into that. But first, we'll be taking a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.